Welcome to episode 53 of the Cohesive Home podcast. Have you ever wanted to sit down with a financial coach and have them guide you through making a budget that works for you? Well, on today's episode, my co-host Melissa chats with Jessi Fearon, the financial expert and blogger behind Real Life on a Budget. If you're thinking about how to improve your finances in 2019 or even how to get out of debt completely, you are going to absolutely love this episode. In it, Jessi shares her best advice for getting out of debt, getting on the same page with your partner, and why thinking about your end goal with your finances is the secret to making it all work. Let's jump right in. Take it away, Melissa.
So, Jessi, thank you so much for being on our show today. I am really excited to dive into all things finance. This is something that I try to be good at, and I think most people listening try to be good at, but to really actually tackle the beast of financial stability or financial wellness, if you will, that is something that Kate and I have really been wanting to dive into lately. And when we befriended you on Instagram, we knew immediately, oh my gosh, we have to interview her. And so, Jessi, would you mind just, kind of diving into your story of who you are and how you got to where you are now, being kind of this financial guru that you are?
Well, thank you, Melissa. I'm super excited to be here. I became a personal finance coach in 2017 because I wanted to educate and empower other families to take control of their finances, to embrace debt-free living, and to just live the life that they have always wanted to live. I firmly believe in living a real life on a budget. Because what's the point in budgeting if it doesn't actually fit your real life, right?
Right.
And so back in 2012, I started 2012 pregnant and ended it pregnant.
Oh, I feel you on that one. I've done that before too.
So crazy times.
Yep.
And I was a stay-at-home mom. And but I was also a new college graduate, so that meant student loans were starting to come due at that time as well. And so we started 2013, and knowing obviously that we were expecting a second child, and so I was kind of making sort of a mock budget, like kind of just going through our finances, kind of seeing, okay, when we have the new baby, like what our kind of finances going to be like, diapers and all that, because I was already buying that stuff anyway. So I kind of had an idea of what that was going to cost, but obviously it was going to increase. So I started going through this, and I started realizing that we weren't going to have any money. Like we weren't necessarily going to be broke, but things were going to be super tight. Yeah. And we knew we didn't want me to go back to work because we live in Metro Atlanta and traffic here is just absolutely awful. Yeah. And we were like, we don't want me to go back to work where half my paycheck is going to go towards the cost of daycare, not to mention me driving all over the place, fighting traffic just to get home, to make dinner, to get kids in bed, and to go to bed and do it all over again the next morning. Yep. We didn't want that. And so it brought about some very tough and hard conversations. And from those conversations came about us jumping on the debt-free journey and deciding that we were done with debt. At the time, we only had 2 credit cards. Earlier on in our marriage, we had learned our lesson of credit cards. And so, by every statistic, we were doing well with credit card debt because we each only had 1 credit card apiece. And, we weren't paying it off every single month, but we weren't going crazy with it either. So we were somewhere in the middle when it came to that. And so we were going to pay out the credit cards. We were going to get rid of my Tahoe loan that I had. We're going to get student loans. And then we had the mortgage after that. And so we just decided, okay, we're going to get rid of this just over $55,000 of consumer debt, which again was the credit cards, the Tahoe, and the student loans. And we made our plan. And right before our third child in 2015 was born, we made the last payment on my student loans and paid off all of that $55,000 of debt.
Wow. Okay, so did you eat ramen all the time? Like, what did you do? Like, that's what I understand. I understand like that whole debt snowball thing. I get that. I think a lot of our listeners probably have heard of that. with Dave Ramsey. And so I understand like the theoretically, getting rid of that much debt in that short of amount of time. But you weren't working, right? Were you still?
I was not working at the time, no.
Okay. So how, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, I guess you don't mind because you are the financial person. I'm like, how? He's like talking about finances is always like, ooh, should I ask that question? But I'm going to ask it. What in the world? What
God
kind of?
bless me with not having any shame. So I tell everybody everything. I'm like, oh, whatever.
I know. That's why I'm like, wait until somebody tries to interview me. I'm going to be like, I'm an open book. Like, I'll just tell you whatever. You probably don't want to ask me too many questions.
Exactly. I'm like, I might tell you things you don't want to know.
Yeah. Exactly. So, okay. So what does that look like for a small family? Obviously, you didn't have a ton of mouths to feed. Your husband, I'm guessing, had a decent job. And so how do you buckle? Like, did you guys move? Did you own a house already? Like, what was that? Tell me.
We owned our home. I mean, not outright. Obviously, we had a mortgage. Which is the same house that we live in right now. And, but our mortgage was, it's always been at 709 and some change. That's where it's always been at because we bought our house as a foreclosure. My husband is a professional remodeler. He remodels homes for a living.
Gotcha.
And, so, we had the advantage there where we were able to purchase a foreclosure that was in horrible condition, and my husband was able to remodel it. So
that was
our mortgage our mortgage payment every single month wasn't very high to begin with. So that was very helpful. I will say that was very helpful to us. But I mean, we did have my Tahoe loan, which cost us roughly about $450 a month, and then my student loans were over $600 a month. So it was pretty tight. It was pretty tight.
Yeah.
And we did have to make a lot of sacrifices in the way of grocery stores. I typically don't eat breakfast anyways. And so that was an easy thing for me to cut out. My husband doesn't really eat breakfast either. So that wasn't a big deal for us. So we're like, okay, we don't need to buy breakfast foods for a while. And for dinners, it was just very simple dinners. And my husband's also a hunter too. So, I mean, I loved it when he would go kill something and bring it home because
you're like free food.
Exactly. So it was just a lot of that, a lot of meal planning and a lot of very simple meals where, it might have been like the meat portion of the plate and one side. Like there wasn't like a full plate of stuff. It was just like very small stuff that we ate, and that was how we honestly made it work in the grocery store and Aldi too. Aldi is like amazing. Yeah. If you haven't Aldi, go shop at it. Yeah. You will be so happy. Oh my goodness. Without Aldi, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah. Well, I'm like a huge Trader Joe's fan now. Like I'm like all about it. It's like cut our budget down at least by $50 a week, which is huge for us.
Yeah.
And Aldi, I haven't dove into Aldi. I've tried it a couple times, but Kate is a huge Aldi fan, and she's always like, go to Aldi. I'm like, I know, I gotta do one thing at a time. I'll get there.
Well, the great thing is the owner of Trader Joe's and Aldi, they're brothers. So
there we go. Well,
so they have similar business models. So
yeah, that makes sense. We had Aldi in Germany, but we didn't. It's so funny. Just they're like the exact same thing. Like even in Germany, it's the exact same thing.
That is awesome, though.
Yeah, it really is nice. So your values during this time, obviously, I see it as a financial freedom being a major value, right? I mean, that is a value that is driving you to do these other things. But were there any values that you guys, it might take some extra money to adhere to a certain set of values within your family that you aren't willing to give up during that time? Can you tell us like some things that you and your husband had to maybe work through to like get on the same page with certain things, or maybe you guys were always on the same page, but you knew from the get-go there were things that you could not sacrifice. Like for me, for instance, I can't sacrifice the food that we eat. Like I am like hearing you say that about like those portions. I'm like, I got 3 kids like that are like eat a lot of food, and that would be really hard for me to like totally cut back. Right. So I don't know. Can you dive into that? That's kind of a loaded question, but
I mean, and I totally feel you because I now have 3 growing kids, and it would
Yes.
be very hard to attempt to go back to that. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I totally feel you. For us, one of the things like my husband, he's such a busybody. Like I said, he professionally remodels homes for a living, and so he's constantly got to be doing something with his hands. It's how his brain works, how he
Hmm.
processes things. He's just got to do something tangible with his hands, and so he is kind of known. Literally, earlier this year, my husband tells me he's going to go get his hammer. The next thing I know, my house is literally shaking. And I'm like, what on earth? And I go out my front door, and my husband is ripping the front porch off my house.
Awesome.
Yeah, all I knew was he was getting a hammer. And the next thing I know, I have no front porch. And I'm like, what? But that's how he does. Like, he needs a project to do all the time. And it was something that had to be done, but then
Yeah.
maybe not necessarily at that moment. But
Yeah.
it was eventually going to have to be fixed. So that's why we created this like project fund for him. And it was birthed during the debt-free journey because he just would need to go and do that. And he would just go and take care of something without realizing, hey, honey, we need money to do that. And we
Hmm.
currently don't. So we set up
Yep.
this project fund where he can just go and rip things off my house and fix it however he wants to. And it's all
Hmm.
in his little fund there, and he can just spend it however he wants to. I don't know anything about it. I don't care. It's as long as you don't go over what's in there, I don't care what you do.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah. That's so okay. I love that though, because that can be applied to so many different things. Like somebody
It is.
who just absolutely loves going shopping for, I don't know, like new shoes once a month. I have no idea. Probably nobody listening to this podcast. But you can tailor that to whatever you need, knowing that like that is something he valued and you
Yes.
guys made that work.
He's a spender, so he has to spend money, if that makes sense. Like he wants to do that. And like for me, I'm a saver. So like I can literally walk in a store and be like looking at an item, be like, oh, I really like this, blah, blah. And then the moment I realize I don't have money for it, I can put it down and walk out the store. My husband can't do that. Like, it's very
Ah,
hard for him to do that. And so, just like for me, it's very hard whenever we need to take money from savings. Like I have a death grip on it. I don't want to give it up. And my husband always has to remind me, we saved for a reason, honey. Like
mm,
it's okay. That money can go now. So, there's
yeah.
always those nuances with either one, and we kind of balance each other out a little bit there. And so for me, I had to realize that in order for him to not feel constrained by the fact that we were living such a tight budget, I had to give him that freedom to be able to do his projects when he wanted to on his own terms. So he didn't feel like I was controlling him, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's well, and that shows a lot of wisdom on both of your parts, knowing that like you guys are working as a team, even though your strengths are different, right? It's like you've
Yeah.
worked together to balance each other out. So that's so good. So there's going to be a lot of people listening going, okay, it's 2019. Oh my gosh. Ah. Scream and then go, okay, settle down. We're good. It's 2019. Wow. Um, we want to get out of debt this year, or we want to start that journey, right? Do you have any um, beginning steps for someone that's wanting to start that journey that you can say, okay, let's start here and then go here, and then obviously point them in a direction maybe for you to help them later on, but where would they start?
Definitely with making a budget, which I know everyone is going to hear that word and go, oh my God, no, I'm not doing that. But that is definitely the first step. And when I say budget, I really just mean a plan.
Hmm.
Because just like when you write in your planner or you write a to-do list, there's a certain level of peace that comes over you because then now you know what needs to be done, right?
Right.
It's the same with the budget, with your money. It's the same thing. Just writing down those numbers, it gives you a sense of peace. And then the next thing you know, you can take action on it. And it negates action. Like you, all of a sudden you write the plan and you're like, okay, I can do this now. And
Hmm.
for making a budget, like you don't have to make it complicated. I am such a huge fan of keeping it simple. Just, you don't need 15,000 categories. Just write down the categories that are important to you and what you need. Like everyone always asks, like on Instagram, I will post what our budget is for that month. And people will be like, well, why don't you have clothing included? I'm like, well, because I don't need to buy clothing this month. If you don't have to buy it,
Right.
don't put it in your budget. You don't need to put it there if it's not that important enough to you to include it for that month. You don't need to do that. You don't have to have categories for every single little bitty thing. You can just
Yeah.
pick and choose the categories you need for that month. And if you've never budgeted before, the best place to start is to log into your bank account, look at what the current checking account balance is, write it down, look at the stack of bills you have, look at your calendar, determine, when all those bills are due, like, where your paycheck cycle is going to fall. And then write down the amount of the bills that are due between now and your next paycheck and the amount that you are predicting that you're going to spend on groceries and any other things that you're going to spend. And boom, you've made a budget for at least the week or 2 weeks or however long you get paid in between those two paychecks. And that's the starting point.
So, okay. And I like that. I'm already there though. And so I'm going to ask a question for people that I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jessi.
Okay. I'm ready. Let's do this.
So for someone like myself who I'm very strict on my budget. I have, I know where my money's going, but there's very little extra. And we know that there's going to be very little extra until, say, like right now we're in an apartment because we just moved, and we're going to be moving out of this apartment into a rental home possibly that will have a lower price, hopefully. Cross my fingers on that. And so right now, we're, to be quite frank, we're living paycheck to paycheck. And so how would you go about advising someone like myself that it's hard to even find that wiggle room? Is there a way to find wiggle room, or is this something that you have to look at that long haul and go, okay, we need to make changes down the road in order to get that wiggle room to start paying off debt or doing those extras that we need to do?
Yes, I think that this is kind of an either or both situation. So in order to find more wiggle room in your budget, you either have to cut expenses or add more income or do both. And we did both of those things during our debt-free journey. So we had to cut our expenses down to like the absolute bare minimum that we possibly could, which is really hard. Really, really hard. I mean, we had to, set thermostats super low in the wintertime. And at the time, we still had the single pane 1970s windows on our home. And so we were literally tacking blankets up over the windows to try to keep the heat in,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, so there was extreme measures that we took, and not everybody has to do extreme measures. You get to decide how you want to do it. But that's the first thing. You cut expenses down as far as you possibly can, or as far as you're willing to go. And then the next thing would be to add more income through side hustles. At one point, this was not when my husband and I were married. This is actually before I was married, and I had gotten myself in a little bit of a financial trouble with debt. Again, this is why I don't like debt, because I just get in trouble with it. Yeah. So I had to get a part-time waitressing job to pay off a couple of credit cards that I had. And so I hated that job, absolutely hated it. But that was one of the things I had to do. So side hustles, part-time jobs, asking for raises. That's another thing that I've done before, stuff like that in order to increase your income. Or, of course, you can do both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. That's, by just having, I don't know, a brain. I knew that, I don't know how else to say that. I knew that there was going to be something we were going to have to bring more income in. So, that's kind of the point that we're at right now and what we're trying to figure out. So, cool. Okay.
And that's always like a hard spot to be in too. It really is a hard spot. I have several friends that are in that spot right now, and it can be such a challenge, especially trying to find side hustles. One of the side hustles I did is I walked dogs. There's a neighborhood not far from my house that several people in that neighborhood needed somebody to walk dogs, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. So I could just go over there while they were at work and walk their dogs for them. And that's what I did for about 2.5, almost 3 years. I did that while we were working our way of paying off debt. So that was a good little side hustle for me to do. And it was a great exercise too with my kids.
Yeah.
Get to the house and have them run.
That's awesome. Oh, that's a great idea. So the other day, someone stopped and asked me where I got my glasses.
Which happens, every other day? Because you always have the cutest glasses.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's partly because I'm obsessed with Warby Parker. They are only $95 with my prescription. And that means I can have more than one, which is great. They have anti-glare, anti-scratch coating, and you get to try them first for free for 5 days with their home try-on program. It's kind of a no-brainer, honestly.
Well, and especially because with every pair you buy, they also give a pair to someone in need, and I just love supporting companies that are doing good in the world.
Yes, I absolutely love that, which made me even more excited when they wanted to partner with us and make this podcast possible. And so that means that you and I, Kate, we got to do the 5-day try on. So have you done yours yet?
I did. So I got my box, and Melissa, it was so funny because the kids all wanted to try on the glasses. I basically had to hide it so that I could actually try them on. But I tried on all 5 pairs for my whole family, and I think I found a winner.
So which ones did you choose?
So I love the Felix in Sandalwood Matte. I feel like it definitely ups my style game. So what about you? Did you find a keeper in your home try-on kit?
I did actually. Well, I'm still kind of narrowing it down, but I absolutely loved the Hawkins in polished gold. And actually, to help me narrow down my choice, I downloaded their app on iTunes, and it has this awesome feature that is called a home try-on companion, which allows you to quickly take photos wearing all the frames, and then they stitch it together in a video, and I can share it on Instagram or just send it to a friend or to my mom to help me. And it was really cool and convenient. I loved it.
So are you going to post that video on Instagram so that everyone listening can see it? I mean, I would love to see it.
Well, I guess I have to now. And also for my iPhone friends, if you have the iPhone X, which unfortunately I don't, but if you do, you have to make sure to download that app because there's a brand new feature called Find Your Fit. And Find Your Fit uses the iPhone X's true depth camera to map and measure key facial features. And using these measurements, Find Your Fit recommends about 12 Warby Parker frames that are likely the best fit for your face. The process is seamless and takes just a few seconds.
Well, darn. I guess I should have used the app instead of letting my children help pick out my glasses.
I'm sure they did great.
They did. They were wonderful stylists. Okay, friends, we know that buying glasses can be expensive, it can be annoying, and sometimes just downright overwhelming, especially if you have kids like we do and you cannot imagine dragging them to the eye doctor's office to try on glasses. I mean, I don't want to do that.
No, I've done that before. It's not fun.
Right.
So instead, you can try on their affordable and stylish glasses in the comfort of your own home. Head to warbyparker.com/cohesivehome to order your free home try-on program. Warby Parker will send you 5 pairs of glasses totally of your own choosing and mail them directly to your home, giving you 5 days to try them on.
And then when you find a winner, you can head to warbyparker.com/cohesivehome and order your favorite pair. And if you can't find your prescription, they'll even call your eye doctor for you. It is so easy.
And if you're feeling daring, use their app, which you can find on iTunes, to make your video of trying on your 5 pairs and share it with us. Head to warbyparker.com/cohesivehome today to find your perfect pair of glasses. A lot of times we get people that email in and ask us how to get my spouse. Oh, my spouse is not wanting to, I don't know, declutter, or my spouse isn't wanting to get rid of his old, cards or t-shirts, or I don't know. Excuse me. And so the question I have for you is, what if their spouse is kind of dragging their feet? And they're like, debt, no big deal. It's like just something we just have to live with. It's just commonplace. I mean, gosh, I know that's what my parents just always thought, I think. Now they don't,
Yes.
But for a long time, especially in the 90s, it was like, oh, debt, it's just part of life.
Yep.
And so what if you have a spouse that thinks that? Do you have any tips or tricks to get them on the same page?
Well, the first thing I will say, this is something that I struggle with all the time. I still have to remind myself of this, is that I have to remind myself of when I'm communicating with my husband, especially about something where we might be at opposing opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remind myself to use words like, we and us and
Yes.
ours instead of saying I, me, or you, because if I'm not careful, I end up sounding like I'm attacking
Yeah.
him instead of actually reminding both of us that we are in this together. And so that's my first tip, is to just be cognizant of the way that you're speaking to your spouse. And, are you making sure that you're keeping that team mentality and not, drawing a line in the sand and saying, you stand there, I stand here, and let's duke it out. So that's the first thing. And the next thing would be for my husband, it was the net worth. I calculated that, and he didn't like that low number. That number spoke to him much better than a regular budget would. In fact, I make the budget, and then my husband just asks me how much money he gets. That's how that works. Like, he gets veto power. We talk about it when there's big issues that come up, but my husband wants nothing to do with those nuances.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine, and that works, but when I showed them the net worth number, he didn't like that number was so small. And it really bothered him. And then once I showed him in the budget how much money we could actually add to our budget, it was almost like giving ourselves a pay raise once we didn't have all these minimum payments. And so from there, it brought that conversation to fruition. We were able to keep going with the conversation until we were finally both on board, and we were like, yep, we're done with debt. We're done. Yep. We're moving on from here. Yep. And so that's just kind of how it went from there. It's just, know your spouse better than anybody else. So you know what's going to speak to them and what's not. You know that if your spouse doesn't like to budget and you bring the budget to them, or you're showing it to them, and you're trying to go line by line with them, they're probably going to, eyes are going to glaze over, and they don't want part of that. So maybe you just kind of calculate something that you feel is going, the real meat and potatoes of the conversation. If for you it is paying off debt, calculate how much in minimum payments you're paying every month, and how much that is literally a pay raise. Like, that's how much we could add to our budget. You could save this money, we could do this, and then talk about what your goals are. If you guys are trying to save to buy a house, talk about, look at how much money we could put, towards our down payment that we want to make. Or if you're looking to just save money or buy a car or travel to Europe, or whatever your big goals are, include those in that conversation, so that way you can say, hey, if we want to get here, we've got to make these sacrifices and these choices now to be able to get here.
Right. Yep. I know that there's a lot of people out there telling you, do this first, do this. How did you guys tackle it? Like, what was your first, obviously your budget, but then once you guys said, okay, this is how we can cut down our budget, and this is how we can have this extra to put it, what did you decide? Did you tackle your lowest payment first, or how did that start?
We did follow the debt snowball method. So we tackled the two credit cards that we each had. We tackled those first. My credit card was the first one because it only had, it was right at a 40 or a $440 balance. So we just really bootstrapped for a month and a half and just paid that one off as quick as possible. And then it took us a little while longer to pay off the second one, which was my husband's, because it had just under $4,000 of credit card debt on it. And so we had made a plan to have that one paid off before our second child was born. And sure enough, 2 weeks before he was born, we had paid that off. And then it took us a little while longer to get rid of the Tahoe, because I had really wanted to pay off the Tahoe because I loved the Tahoe. It was fully loaded, wood grain interior, the whole nine. And the reality was that there was no way we were going to be able to make it happen. And so we ended up doing an equal trade in for the Tahoe, where they basically just bought the Tahoe for what the loan was on it, because we weren't upside down on it, thankfully. And then we paid cash for the Sequoia that I have now. And so that was almost 5 years ago that we did that, and I love that car. It's paid for. It did.
On your stories.
It did.
Sorry.
It did. It's making me very sad, very, very sad. My poor car, the headlights being held up by blue painter's tape currently.
Nice.
And it's
oh no.
It's very sad. And getting rid of the Tahoe was one of the hardest things for me on this debt-free journey, which I know a lot of people are probably going to roll their eyes or whatever, it's a car, lady. Get over it.
I get it.
The reality is I put a lot of my value in how I looked in my car. It was a status symbol to me. And I'm I had this really nice car. And then I traded it in for a car that was much older, a little bit more well-loved, a little more dings and scratches before it got hit.
Yeah.
And So, and that was really hard for me. Even my dad and my brother told me that my car was that's the ugliest car I've ever had. So,
Oh,
and my
that's
brother was
hard.
over on New Year's and he goes, "Yeah, no, I didn't think that your ugly car could get any uglier." And then somebody hit it and now it's even uglier. And I was like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you, little brother. I love you."
Oh, see, I totally get that though. I do. I totally understand that. Like I love my car, but I mean it's bright yellow. And so I think there's some stigma with a bright yellow car sometimes that people are like, "Oh yeah, you look super cool in that." I'm like, I love my Fiat though. But like my husband, I mean, we have both of our cars paid off, but his truck like leaks oil right now, and I have it's hard for me to like see that and go, "Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. You work at like a super swanky, like really nice school. Like you should have a better car than that." And so I'm like, at least get the oil leak fixed. But it's that sort of thing that it does that really trips people up. I know it does me. Like wanting those nice things and wanting to look a certain way, to have certain things that are, I don't know, comfortable. And I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm an instant gratification type person. I think I can have patience and wait, but when it comes to just, I don't know, like for instance, I don't go and get manicures and pedicures. Like I rarely get those. Usually my mom takes me to get one because my toes are so bad. So it's like little things like that I can withhold from, but like those bigger ticket items, where you
Yes.
know that you want that. So I don't know, do you have any tips for anybody like me that just like it's so hard to not want those things, right? Those nicer
It is.
things in life.
Is. And and I really think that, of course, like not to beat the social media bandwagon, but it is true that social media, like we can compare our lives so easily to people that we know in our real life and people that we've never even met before,
Yeah.
very quickly. And so without us even realizing it can create this desire in us that we have to have more, we have to have this, we have to have more, 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 more. But the reality is that most of us have plenty. Most of us have more than we actually need
Yep.
anyways.
Yes.
And so I have to always remind myself of that because it's funny, talking about my car and it getting hit. I was having a real issue. It's drivable right now. My car is drivable.
Good.
It looks awful, but it's drivable.
Yeah.
And so I had to drive to Aldi yesterday to go do grocery shopping. And it was really hard for me. My ego was taking a massive hit.
Yeah.
And I was just having a really hard time with it. And I was like lamenting this to my husband, and my husband kind of reminded me. He was like, you really need to be grateful because basically another woman hit my car and she's not complying with her insurance company. They can't get her on the phone. The insurance company is right now saying they're not going to pay for my car to be fixed. So it's a whole big debacle. Yes, it's a whole big debacle. And so we've been waiting like now over a week for my car to even be fixed. And we're probably going to have to wait longer. And so my husband was like, you need to be grateful that your car runs. He was like, think about all this time if your car didn't actually run,
Yeah.
And so I was like, dang it, I really wanted to throw my 32-year-old temper tantrum right now.
I know.
But it's those things that we have to remind ourselves to be grateful for the things that we have and, just those little blessings. Like the more we remind ourselves of those blessings and that we practice that attitude of gratitude, the more and more that we do that, the less and less that we actually want because we realize we don't need it. We realize that that's just a want and that's not a need, even though it's a really, really nice want.
Yeah.
Like it reminds us of that. So that is my big tip, is to just do what you can to practice gratitude every single day, especially when you catch yourself throwing, adult-sized temper tantrums, just remind yourself to be grateful for things, even though it's hard. Just be grateful.
Goals now that you guys have paid off your big amount of debt. I mean, did I see somewhere on your Instagram that you said you paid your house off, or you're almost?
We will be paying that off in just a couple of weeks. We'll be paying off our house. And
wow! So that
was
the next one. That was the big next thing.
That was the big next thing, was to pay off our house. We saved up our emergency fund, and then from there we started just throwing everything we had at our mortgage, and it'll be paid off in a couple of weeks. And it feels really weird. Like it feels so weird. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, because will you not have any other big goals after that? I mean, you guys will basically just be debt free.
We will be, and that'll be just really, really strange.
Yeah, that's amazing
Exciting
though.
but strange. But
Yeah, here you go. Okay,
so
what are my goals now? Now we have to travel.
well, and so we do definitely want to travel more, but we also are planning to save for another property. Like we don't have a property in mind. We don't really have any of that quite figured out yet. We just know that eventually we do
Yeah.
want to buy another like a land or just property somewhere,
Yeah.
and possibly rent out the house that we live in now.
Cool.
We don't quite know though yet. We haven't
Yeah.
100% decided on
Yeah.
anything. So, but we'll
Oh,
just
that's
definitely be
cool.
saving for the interim while we figure it out.
Yeah. I, I guess I did have one more question regarding your husband.
Okay.
During this time, when you guys were paying off all this debt and stuff, was he totally happy with his job? Like, was he happy? Were you guys content in what you were doing, or was it a struggle through the whole thing?
Um, yeah, there were times where he really hated his job.
Yeah.
He had gone to work for a company, a corporation. Like my husband, again, he's done construction his basically his entire working life, and so he had gone to work for an actual corporation versus just like a small time business type of thing. And so the great thing is we had benefits. That was wonderful. But the downside is that they just worked him to the ground. There was one time he was gone for over a month and he was working the graveyard shift. And so he was just dead dog tired. I mean, I kind of count that as almost a blessing though from God, just because our daughter, when she was about 2 months old, like she ended up having to go to the hospital because she couldn't breathe. And so it's, yeah, and he was out of town. So it was this big crazy thing. But the blessing is that, I had to go back home so I could get my boys clothes and stuff so they could stay with their grandmother. And my husband called me and he's like, I'm on my way home. Don't worry about it. He's like, I want you to go home and go to bed. He's like, this is my morning time. He's like, I'll stay with her. Came home and he drove the 4 hours home and he stayed with her that night in the hospital. It was so wonderful. And I'm like, God totally showed up there. But
Yeah.
but overall it was a challenging period. But it's also what led us to my husband, quitting that job and starting his own business. And the great thing is that, we had paid off all the debt while he was working for the other company. And
Yeah.
when he really knew he didn't want to do the same, where we were very aggressive with saving up our emergency fund. So we were prepared when he left that company.
Cool.
And that was such a blessing. So
That's so cool. Oh, that's so cool though that he was able to go and start his own business even through all of this. That's amazing.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so my last question is, how much was your emergency fund? That is something I'm always really intrigued about because I think it's different for everybody. I know that, you know, Dave Ramsey, he says like 2,000 or something. I have no, or whatever it is, like half your pay or blah blah blah. I don't even know. It's some number crunching thing. I don't know. So what was yours?
Yes. Well, ours, when my husband left the company, it was just over $12,000 was in our emergency fund. It's
Wow.
less now because we bought my husband's truck in cash. So
Gotcha.
we're working on building that up too at the same time. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Well, I it's fascinating to me because I feel like it, it's something that I could, oh my gosh, I could ask you so many more questions about because there are so many nuances to each person's story. And
yes.
so I know that, your journey right now is going to look a little bit different than it did, 5 years ago. And so everyone listening, I know your journeys are all going to be different. Mine's different than Jessi's. And so, but it's an encouragement to hear that it is possible and that it just takes sacrifice, really.
It does. It does. And I know that that sounds like such a hard word. Like a lot of people hear that word and they're like, "Oh my God," but what does that mean? It just means that you have to set your eye on what the actual prize was. For us, we knew that if we didn't pay off the debt, like I was going to have to go back to work and then we were therefore going to be living a life that we didn't want, a life that was outside of what we valued most. And that just wasn't cool with us. And so, of course, your story is going to be different, but you just have to define, that big thing for you. Why is it that you care enough to want to sacrifice and pay off this debt? And you need to write it down and you need to stick it everywhere that you possibly can to remind yourself
Hmm.
all the time why you're making those really tough sacrifices, because I promise you it is so worth it in the end. Like it's absolutely worth it. I never thought that I was just not ever going to have to like worry about money. I always thought money worries were always going to be a thing, and they're not.
Right.
Like that's not to say that I don't ever have moments where we have to like, go back to bootstrapping it or anything like that, but we're prepared. Whereas before we were never prepared, and it was scary. It was almost like we were constantly living in this static, like we didn't know, like when's the hammer going to drop, right? And so we're just constantly dealing with that. And so now we don't have to deal with that, because now we are prepared for when those big things happen, those big major life things, those big curveballs, and it's very freeing, very, very freeing.
Cool. So do you guys go, I just keep asking questions. I don't care. It's my podcast. I can do what I want, right? Okay. So one more question. The last one, I promise. So did you guys, during your time of paying off debt, did you travel? Did you take vacations? Did you do anything like that? Have you since then?
No, we went camping. That's one of mine and my husband's like favorite pastimes. So
that's us too.
We went camping. We just load up the John boat and just go down the river and find a spot to go camping, and that's what we did.
Cool. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's the only type of vacation that we took during the time. In fact, the very next year in 2016, that was the first time we took a real family vacation. We went to Tybee Island, and that has become our favorite place ever. We love it. That? So it's in Georgia. It's right off the coast of Georgia. Yeah, so it's only about a 5-hour drive from our house, and it's very, very awesome just being able to go on a vacation. It was so cool when we went that first time, because our kids got to see the beach and all of that, and it was very freeing too, knowing that it was all paid for. Like we had saved up the money, and the cash was, it was bought and paid for. We didn't have to worry about coming home and trying to figure out how to pay it back, and that was really awesome.
That's so cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, I promise that was my last question. This has been a great conversation. And so I know that our listeners are going to want to know where to find you and where they can get more financial support from you, because I know that you give a lot of great advice on social media. So, and you have a blog too, I believe. So
yes.
Tell me all.
Well, my blog is at jessifearon.com. It's Real Life on a Budget. I share my family's real life on a budget, and kind of our whole story is just kind of archived on the blog. It's been there the whole time. We just kind of kept blogging my way through the journey. So I'll just dig through the archives and you'll find a lot of stuff. And then for social media, I'm just at Jessi Fearon. I do have a debt-free workbook. It's a free workbook on my website that you can download, just Jessi Fearon /debt-free workbook. And you can download a PDF workbook to be able to make your own debt-free plan.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, I'm going to do that. I'm definitely doing that. And we will link to all of those links in the show notes. And just thank you again, Jessi. This has been a great conversation. I was really excited to talk to you, and it turned out as good as I hoped. So,
well, thank you again, Melissa. I really appreciate it, and I really had fun talking to you tonight.
Thanks again, Jessi, for coming on and chatting with me. And also a big thanks to Warby Parker for sponsoring this episode. To get your free home try-on program, head to warbyparker.com/cohesivehome. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.